I assume we might be live, but I'm not seeing the red over there. There it is. All right. Hello, everyone. Thanks for giving us your time today. This is VR Download. It is Tuesday, the end of April 2024, and I have no notes and no tablet right in front of me, so we are going to be relying on my partner here over the Atlantic Ocean, David Heaney, in London, to give us your comments as we're doing our live show on YouTube. And then we'll, of course, be on rebroadcast on every podcast platform imaginable. Thank you for giving us your time today. David, what do we have?
So first we'll talk about the news that actually just dropped. We haven't even got an article out on it, but we thought we would come in here and talk about it because it's not a huge update, but the Quest V65 update has just been announced. So we'll talk about that first. Then we'll talk about the Tilt 5 sale, which heavily discounts the tabletop AR glasses. We'll talk about Insta360 X4, a new handheld 8K 360-degree camera that's only $500. And the only there is in comparison to previous 8K cameras, which were a lot more expensive. We'll talk about Meta's head of AR glasses hardware claiming that they're as mind-blowing as the original Oculus Rift. So like trying VR for the first time is how mind-blowing they're supposed to be. We'll talk about Mark Zuckerberg claiming that Quests will still be the most popular headsets after Horizon OS is available to third parties. We'll talk about the headlines claiming that Apple dramatically cut Vision Pro production due to weak demand and why we think this is false. We will then finish by talking about Bloomberg's new report, which claims Vision Pro 2 is set for 2026 and Apple is struggling to release a cheaper headset first.
Yeah, lots of news from across the various headsets out there right now to get into. Why don't you just jump right into it or talk to our commenters? What do we got going on over there in our comments?
Yeah, we've got a lot of people here. We've got someone from St. Louis. We've got a lot of people saying where they're from, especially at the start of the show. So it's great to see everyone. We're obviously sorry again for the delay. We've got so much going on right now. It's difficult to get everything on time. But yeah, let's start by just talking about the V65 update. As I said, we don't even have an article on it yet, but basically the headline feature here is that you can now view panoramas that you've captured on your phone in the headset. And this is clearly Meta once again copying something that Vision Pro focused on, because one of the things you can do in Vision Pro is very easily view your phone panoramas on this like giant virtual curved display that makes it look almost lifelike. It's almost like you're there. It's as if you're just seeing like a segment of a 360-degree photo. And on Vision Pro, with its micro OLED near 4K displays, those look incredible, right? The moments that you've captured on your phone in panorama mode, they look great. So it'll be interesting to see how that looks in Quest 3. It should be like the spatial videos feature where you just use the MetaQuest app and they send over to your headset and then you can view them.
Yeah, we'll be curious to see how that runs and how these environmental features. Whenever I hear about panoramas, I always wonder what is the pathway from panoramas to spatial environments and what are the tools for creating each, right? I see it's a bummer not to have all the commenters there to respond to. Is there anything in particular that we should get into on this subject? Because I want to get into some of these bigger subjects later on. There's not a whole lot we know about 65. And we were just joking right before we came out here that, like, I wonder if over time it makes sense for Meta to kind of not detail the features in their OS updates until they really confirm that they run. But that means that they would be competing against the sort of sleuths that are right now unpacking the V65 files and then going through the code to see if there's any interesting features in the future that they could, reveal by searching for certain strings. Stuff you used to do, right, David?
Yeah, I mean, I think they will always want to highlight the new features coming out, right? It's a marketing thing saying this is how your headset got better. This is a feature that, we were maybe missing before and we have now. But they always do miss out some things, right? There's some things that they ship that isn't in the changelog. I don't think that's an intentional strategy, though. I think it's just the classic, the left hand doesn't know what the right is doing situation where it just somehow ships and it wasn't, communicated through to the people who write the changelogs. But yeah, there's not much to say about this update. The other aspects of V65. The other aspect is that a lot of the menus that were no longer in pass-through are now. So the lock screen, the power off screen, all of those would have brought you to a VR void before, and they're now bringing those all into pass-through. So Quest obviously started as a VR first platform, and pass-through was kind of tacked on, and very much so with the Quest 3 launch. They tried to get it in as many places as possible, but today on V64, you will still notice there are a few Quest 3 menus that don't support pass-through, and that's one of the things V65 is polished up.
Wow. Yeah, I'm curious what the commenters are doing about the whole switch over with Horizon OS, what their sort of thoughts are on that announcement as it's been brewing and developing in their heads. Like, I'm curious to see the reactions. I'd love for you to make sure to call out those because
Yeah, I
it's
will for
been sort
sure.
of on my head all week, right? Have you been thinking about this and how it affects things too, David?
Yeah, I mean that's our fourth topic. I'll get into that more once we talk about that Horizon OS topic. Definitely a lot of thoughts on that. It's definitely the biggest VR news of the year so far. The Horizon OS coming to third party headsets. It is a huge piece of news. But let's move on to Tilt 5, I guess, because this is something you've been following very closely, and it's a fascinating system that takes a very different approach from the other hardware out there. And they have this
Yeah.
huge seal. So I'll just quickly say the prices of the seal, and then you can talk a little bit about your experience with this system and Tilt 5 and Jerry Ellsworth. So if you didn't see the news, they have a really deep seal on at the moment for Tilt 5. So one pair of glasses is normally $360 and it's now $250. But the bigger discounts come in the bundles that you need to have a kind of family game night like shown here. So two pairs of glasses used to be $660. And it's currently on sale for $390. That's a massive discount, $660 to $390. And the 3-pack, which is what I expect where the system really shines, where you kind of have three people around a table playing a game together, is normally $960 and it's being sold for just $540. That is an almost 50% discount. So, I guess I'll start off by just asking, are they doing this because they aren't able to shift the units fast enough?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it's really hard for me not to see everything that's happening as not interrelated in some way, shape, form, right? Like I see all these pressures in various ways on each other. And uh $200 is a really tempting price point for any device, right? Like from a Nintendo Switch Lite uh, to a VR headset like Oculus Go many years ago. It's a really you move millions of devices if you can achieve something that is that low priced and has everything you need. Tilt 5 is not that, right? It still has an external Android needed. You still have an external PC needed. And there's not a huge gaming library yet. It's very basic, sort of hobbyist stuff, a couple titles that they've partnered with, content there. But this is a very early platform. It's just I want to for people that are watching. I thought it was important. I want to make sure to mention this. This is a very conceptual image showing Tilt 5. Uh, you can't actually see the visuals up here, the AR visuals floating above the board this way. You can only see them up to the backing of the board. That's why in some configurations the board has a backstop where you can lift up and put the backstop there. And that's why David is pointing out rightly that in a 3-person configuration, this is actually really powerful to have like a backstop with 3 people gathered around it. And if you think of a PC mounted under a table like this with wires running out to 3 headsets, which you can do because the architecture of their platform is a little bit different, you might have something that could work at a cafe or even for family game night with the right board game. Like imagine there's 1 or 2 board games that your family always pulls out again and again. This could conceivably offer you a pathway to that. Now, you asked this core question of like, are they not able to move units? And that's a very like possibly, probably, maybe like the issue here is that $200 is what it seems like the rest of the industry is rocketing towards as quickly as they can. We'll have to talk about other subjects, but if you ship a Quest without controllers, do you get to $200, David?
Yeah, that's certainly conceivable. Maybe 250 if you're talking about like a Quest 3 S or Lite that's rumored to come. But the actual cost to Meta reportedly of touch controllers is only on the order of like $30 or $40 to include them in the package. So you take off about you could take it's not this massive discount that people think it is. It's not going to like take hundreds of dollars off the headset. It'll take $50 or $100 off, depending on how they want to do that from a strategy perspective.
So,
But
but we are talking about that space under $300, I guess, for where standalone VR is. And then you've got AR, which, I mean, you're talking Magic Leap glasses, HoloLens, thousands of dollars for those devices. You've got Apple Vision Pro, which isn't really an AR device, but it has a very strong footing in mixed reality content. That's $3,000 plus. And then you have this differentiated hardware platform that is very very odd. Like it's a different approach than everyone else is doing. And I really think that if Nintendo showed up tomorrow and said, "We want to buy Tilt 5," uh, they would find a way. Like they would find a way to make that happen because there's when we talk about these two platforms, that's what they're missing, right? The Tilt 5 appears to be missing the games and the services of the Nintendo platform. And Nintendo right now, we're all waiting to see what they do with their future hardware ecosystem.
yeah, that's a really good point. This does feel like the most Nintendo of product of the AR VR world right now. We have a commenter here, uh, Gorga, saying that does anyone else have no idea what Tilt 5 is? And as you can see from the image, though, again, as Ian pointed out, this is slightly misleading. It is this reflective AR glasses system where they, instead of trying to build AR glasses with today's technology, which will, cost thousands of dollars and have this tiny field of view and all these other issues, they've gone with a more constrained design choice where you can only see these holograms, these virtual objects within the board. Okay, so within the area of the board, you do get 3D to be clear, but it's within the area of the board. So it's perfect for virtual board games. The problem with Tilt 5 for me is that, like, yes, one pair is $250 on this seal, right? But I can't see anyone really finding a single pair compelling. As you said, and
Oh,
as
sure.
everyone says, but the point of this is gathering around and playing a board game. And the problem is that the normal price for three is $960, right? And even on sale at $540, that's too much. Because to be clear, the other aspect of this is these don't have computing hardware in them. You plug these into a PC. So you put a single PC down by, in this example, I assume it must be hidden under the board, or maybe this is just a demo image where they're not actually connected to a real PC. But you're going to have to connect every single one of those glasses to a USB port on your PC. Realistically, in this situation, that means you have to get a USB hub, or you can do it with an Android phone per device. So it's just, even at the discounted price, it's just too expensive. If Nintendo was to release a product like this, they would never want to ship at that kind of price. This would be an incredible flying off the shelves mass market product if they could put a 3 or 4 pack out there for less than $300, that magical kind of price point. And it was standalone. You had some sort of compute unit that was built into it, or that they all plug into, or compute on board. The problem is that this is just never going to be anything but a niche within a niche until they can
Yeah,
get to that kind of pricing.
there's a couple things conceptually that I just want to, I guess, share here, right? Like one of the things I went out to Tilt 5's headquarters and I tried the demo with an Android phone just to see it for a minute, and it was very, very early. But the idea that these glasses can plug in over USB to uh, a phone, and then you can walk through a museum or some kind of a location-based exhibit, and all you need in each place is one of these boards, or even I was like a bowl type scenario. You could actually get some height out of presenting content that like that. But you could imagine these even put on walls, right? You could imagine 3D content being put into windows, and all you really need is like these around the edge are markers to help, I believe, with uh, tracking where it is in space. But you could imagine there being, what, 60 of these throughout a museum space or a large location. And you could have each person walking through with a custom built kind of like puck in their pocket. And that's, you're getting what, 80% of the way there to what you would get out of like a Magic Leap or a HoloLens. out of a completely different system. Now, I'm not saying like anyone should go do that, but this is the kind of platform we're talking about. Like, if you wanted to mess around with a different approach to doing the types of things I'm talking about than Meta or trackers or some other system, you could try this, I suppose.
Yeah, I think businesses are the real market for this, as you say, museums, board game cafes, just general cafes, like student accommodation that has a large lobby area where they have pool tables already. That kind of scenario where you're already spending, hundreds or thousands of dollars on equipment for people to use. I just wonder how long until mixed reality headsets are light enough and cheap enough that this becomes, as some of the commenters are saying, a feature, not a product, that this just becomes a software thing that people regularly do, right? You already do have some Quest 3 apps that can use shared spatial anchors to be positioned in the same space like this. It's just a matter of, your view of the real world is heavily compromised, so it's not super comfortable to be in there for a long time. I just think it'll be interesting to see how long
Yeah,
that
no,
takes.
that's all perfectly valid. So I saw a couple of people commenting that they didn't see OpenXR support on this platform, and that kind of being a blocker for them in considering it, because you kind of lock yourself into whatever's, like, you got to go also do OpenXR if you want to access a whole bunch of other devices. So that's a hard thing to consider. But this idea conceptually that I wanted to get across, imagine getting Citra, the emulator that we talked, like the emulator we've talked about previously. Imagine getting two instances of it running on your PC, one running to one glasses, one running to another pair of glasses. And imagine you trying to play from like a DS cartridge from Mario Kart in the 2000s, right? One Mario Kart DS cartridge should share the game to multiple players on various Nintendo handhelds. What does the software stack look like that links those two separate instances of an emulator so that they could bring your own ROM, you could bring your own backup to the scenario, and then link them together using a third piece of software here that stands in for the multiplayer functionality of these old games. I'm feeling like that's the missing piece of a lot of this emulation and reliving of old games that we're seeing brought forward. Like, you can go and find a server for Quake, but how can you find a local setup for 4 players to do it from headsets is sort of my question.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a software problem we've seen. We talked last week about this. We're going to have to add bring your own ROM to the VR download drinking game at this point,
Yep.
Nintendo ROMs. But yeah, it's just one of those things that can be done by synchronizing the emulator state, right? We've seen MUVR and PC does this already. It's completely something that it can do. I'm not sure Tilt 5 is the right platform for this, but I'll be very curious to see how many they ship at this kind of pricing.
Well, that I will say, like, it's a good test. So going back to your original core question, which was really good on just why are they doing this, I think this is a very valuable test for them to find out who was on the fence at that price being sold by this being packaged as 2 or 3. If they really do find that it's like a step change difference to send 2 of them out at this price, that could be a powerful, like, informing thing for packaging like a Gen 2 or something down the line. So I hope they get funding. That's one of the things we talk about with them. This is an independent company, and I want to point out the history before we move on in subjects, right?
1 second. Commenters are saying that your microphone started to sound bad. To be clear, commenters, is this something that's been for the entire show, or is it just starting now? It'd be very helpful to us if you can let us know that. So maybe you might want to restart the headset and come back just in case that's going to solve it. James O'Loughlin pointed out in the comments that Jerry Ellsworth, the founder of Tilt 5, is awesome, and we definitely agree at UploadVR. This is it's very impressive that she brought this product to market, and from a technological perspective, it is a very clever solution. It's what engineering is all about: clever building within constraints. Everyone else is out there trying to build these generalized standalone AR glasses that can go outdoors and finding that realistically it's almost impossible. We'll talk about that soon. That's actually our next topic. But Tilt 5 has said, right, with today's technology at a relatively low cost, still too high for the market, but much lower than more generalized solutions, you can build around this constraint. And you can imagine, like, if they did have a lot more games on this, one of the things that Ian's always asking is he's hoping that Demio would come to this, and that would be a great example of a game that would run really well on this. It does seem like Tilt 5 is going to need an acquisition by a big company to really deliver their vision to a wider market. A larger company would be able to subsidize the pricing, would be able to go and pay developers to bring content to it. And obviously, it's very frustrating for Tilt 5. I'm sure that they're not in the position to do that.
Yeah, that was the context. Let me know how my microphone is doing, or let David know how my microphone is doing now that I restarted the headset. The context I gave in my article, and I'll just recap here really quickly, is this technology was originally at Valve. Jerry Ellsworth was originally at Valve more than a decade ago now, as part of their early VR team, AR team, exploring that surface, that area for Valve in the early days. And then she got fired and got called into a room with Gabe Newell, and basically in that meeting made an agreement to buy the technology that's the basis of this and take it back out of Valve, and she would own it in a new company. And so that company was Cast AR. And the thing with Cast AR, though, the reason that this is so tricky for us to discuss is Cast AR very clearly tried to do way too much. They did a Kickstarter campaign, I believe, and then had some stretch goals. And just by the time it was ready to ship, they had burned through a lot of money and manufacturing problems. Like, it all stacks up. So when Jerry Ellsworth got the band back together again for Tilt 5 project, I believe the effort was that the goal was to try to stay really, really focused on this board game scenario and try to bring augmentation to board games and card games and see what you can do with that. That's a really interesting idea when you think about that focus. But when we're talking on the show about like cafes and 2 and 3 and 4 packs, that takes away from the focus that they tried to fix because of what happened to Cast AR. So I understand it's a very difficult balance for us to discuss here.
Yeah, so we have George Jorgensen, and a few commenters are echoing the sentiment, saying that they think Quest 2 being available for less than $300 kills any chance of something like this being popular. I don't think, I mean, the Quest 2, can't do this without you being in a low resolution black and white version of the real world, like really low resolution, where it's basically unusable. So I don't know if I would count that as a real competitor to this. And even on a Quest 3, where you get a decent view of the real world in color, it's still a lot different from a friction perspective. So on every headset, you have to install a specific app and make sure it's updated and make sure your headset's charged. And then you all get around the table and you have to kind of open the app and do the synchronization, and there's a lot of friction there involved. Whereas this, because it's all running off one PC, the PC is powering all the glasses at the same time, and it's a very specific application. The friction is really low here, right? You essentially put the glasses on, grab the wands, press play on the PC, and everything's ready to go. There's no, oh, are you connected? I'm trying to connect. Oh, my app's updating. There's none of that stuff, and that kind of refinement is really interesting. An interesting comment here from Dari Amarson that said another application that we're not thinking about the Tilt 5 would be great for is education. That's really, really true. For schools, this could be actually incredibly valuable.
Yeah, I like the idea of, so one thing we've had real trouble on, David, right? Like, I don't know how much we want to derail this conversation, but how do we label and discuss volumetric VR content? That's a very big area of content that, like, it sits in your space in a volume that's bounded about yay big. It could be, Demio is on a board right in your space. There's cubism that stays in your space, puzzling places, things like that are bounded a volume in your area right in front of like 4 or even 5 people. What do we call those games in comparison to the fully immersive VR games that we go in, or the mixed reality games that use your walls for various things? Like, this thing that sits in front of you in the middle is a completely different thing, and you can dev that type of content on this thing?
Yeah, it's a good question of terminology. I guess the answer may be in your question. You call it a volumetric game, a volumetric app, something that could theoretically on a suitable operating system like Vision OS run alongside other things. You have a virtual game of chess on your table. I guess you could call that a mixed reality game, but all you're really doing is adding something to a table. You're not mixing much reality. Right now, what developers would call that and what Meta would call that is mixed reality. But I think you're right to say that there's a meaningful difference between your entire room getting reskinned and zombies coming out of the wall versus there's a little game of chess sitting on your table. Are we ready to move on to Insta 360?
Yeah, sure. I guess I'll make a little allusion to the Steam VR. Like I would love to see. I want to see this type of board game in Steam VR Home. Like I think that's what we've seen various attempts at that game room, even on Apple Vision OS from Resolution Games, plays with the same idea. So I'd love to see more done with that.
Yeah, I think Game Room is one of the best apps on Vision Pro, arguably the best game, just because of how simple it is. If anyone's not familiar with it, it's just like it has chess and battleships and checkers and a few other games, all of the typical board games. And it's really low friction, right? You just boot it up and it's ready to go, and it supports the spatial personas, so you can have a shared experience there quite easily. But yeah, let's move on to Insta 360 X4. We're not going to talk about this for a huge amount of time, but essentially what's meaningful here and why we covered this is because it dramatically reduces the cost of recording 8K 360 degree videos. This is a little 200-gram device that you can carry around with you. You can record for an hour at 8K or 2 hours at 5K. So at 8K, it can only record 30 frames per second. For 5.7K, it can record 60 frames per second, and at 4K, it can record 100 frames per second. It can also, of course, take 360 photos. And the advantage here and the relevance to VR is obviously that's the way you view these things, right? You can for $500 grab this thing and go and take your own 360-degree photos with a click, or even 360-degree videos, and then go and watch them in your headset, any headset. If you got a PC VR headset, there's like a dozen different apps that will do this for you. Or you can go on a Quest or Pico and just load it up natively in the file system and play it. So not a huge amount to say about this. It's not 3D. Obviously, 3D is still a lot more expensive than $500 and would require a much bulkier device. There's obviously only one lens on each side. It's essentially 280-degree lenses on each side merged together to make 360. There's a lot of kind of very interesting features in this. It has like an onboard chipset to do a lot of the processing and things like wind noise cancellation. It also has like a 6-axis gyroscope. So no matter how you're bending it, it will always keep the horizon stable. So it's not like you're going to get like really shaky footage if you attach this. They are pitching this at, use cases like sticking it on your snowboard or
I don't know. I said, do you think that's a real photo? Like maybe, but that doesn't feel real to me.
I saw the video. I saw the video where the still is from. So the entire thing's fake. I mean,
good on them, but it's still like, is that really going to be comfortable? Is that stabilization going to be good? The test I love of this is like those 3 different frame rates you mentioned and resolutions. I would love to view those back to back on both MetaQuest and Vision Pro to really get a feel. We deal with this in and out, day in and day out. When you take screenshots inside VR, you take video inside VR, you can't translate necessarily how that feels when the frame rates are that significant, or the shake is that bad, or even the slightest shake on this could be terrible for your experience, right?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right to say that 30 FPS is not going to be a great experience on anything moving, right? You're going to want to go to the 60 or even 100 frames per second mode on that. Shake-wise, though, they do have, from the footage they've shown, the stabilization on this is incredibly impressive. Like, this is hardware level and software level stabilization, and they are claiming, and from the footage they provided, it looks to be true, that you can literally do it in applications like this and still get smooth footage. It will balance out the horizon. A few comments here. So firstly, a few people seem to be under the impression that this is only a photo camera. No, this is a video camera. You can take 360-degree videos with this, not just photos. There's another comment asking, Shannon McGee is asking, did Insta360 sponsor this? But they clarify in a follow-up comment that they're saying Insta360 has been paying for people to pump this without disclosing. No, UploadVR has never taken money to pump a product or promote a product. The only time we ever do sponsored posts are on the website. They are clearly labeled in a completely different color to the others. They're a yellow tag instead of green. It will say sponsored post. It will be crystal clear. We will have a notice that says it produced. We are not sponsored by Insta360. I'm covering this, as I mentioned at the start, because I think it's interesting that the price for recording 8K 360 video used to be thousands of dollars, and now it's hundreds of dollars. That's interesting when technology, reduces the price of something by 5 to 10 times, and in a handheld form factor, it's an interesting product.
It is. It definitely is. And this company has done some interesting ideas over the years, but like I've been really ignoring a lot of this content over the years because of the quality of the capture systems, right? I remember getting those VR 180 cameras from Google made by Lenovo, and a single spot on the lens is completely destructive. You will be distracted by the spot on the single lens the entire time. And that's just, you've got to correct for that. You've got to have some kind of system to kind of push past little specks on the lenses destroying your experience, and it happens quite easily with these cameras.
Yeah, for sure. They do have like an editing software that comes with this as well. I think one of the features you can do there is kind of like a content-aware fill style thing. I think as long as you wipe the lenses, the quality, the sample footage I've seen from this looks really impressive. They also have this like attachment for taking underwater, where they claim it can go really quite deep, and you can use it, for underwater stuff. It seems like I don't think there's a huge amount to say about this. I think one of the reasons people would have ignored these cameras in the past is because the quality was terrible, right? Like back then, you'd be talking about like half the resolution, and you need 8K sounds like a lot, but because it's in 360 degrees, 8K is the minimum you need for something like this to look good on a Quest level headset, right? Like 8K 2D video roughly equates angular resolution wise to the Quest 3's display resolution. And that means that that's not even getting close to the Apple Vision Pro's display resolution. Yeah. If you wanted to get something that would hit the Vision Pro's display resolution, you would need like, 16K or something like that, or, maybe slightly below that. And if you add 3D in, then like this is not a 3D camera. A 3D camera would be not only much bulkier, but much more expensive. Then you have to get two angles from the two lenses. So you have to separate the space and take up more space just that alone. Yeah, exactly. It's a very different product. You're talking about a lot more bandwidth in, and that means that you then half the resolution, right? So to match the Quest 3's display resolution on a 3D 360 video, you would need a 16K 3D camera. And for the Vision Pro, it would just be, you'd be talking like 24K, 32K, ridiculous resolutions. That's why this hasn't, that's one of the reasons that these always look terrible in the past was the bit rate, right? The bit rate of delivery platforms. This thing can record at 200 megabits per second, which is, beyond what any of the platforms like YouTube are doing. I haven't tested yet, but I'm very curious to soon test the exact bit rate of Vision Pro's Apple Immersive Video, because I think what they really nail there is high bit rate. YouTube VR just added support for 8K playback on Quest a few weeks ago. We talked about it on last week's show. So only now can you even put the quality of video out there on these wide platforms like YouTube that even matches. So while
even comes close, right? Like the thing. Yeah. So I had a discussion there was a guy had like a housewarming party here and was showing this person off VR and realized he was actually asking like really deep questions about what the market viability is of VR overall. And I had to explain like it only gets better from here, right? It's have they reached bare minimum was the core question. And my answer was like, heck yeah, they've reached the bare minimum. That's what we've seen is two different expressions of the bare minimum. We've seen Apple's expression where they think OLED and a display that at least crosses a threshold for like 4K content to look great. And then Meta has its gaming minimum bar that they're shipping in very, very large numbers. And it's just two things that just get better. I wrote this line in one of my articles. These are the worst headsets of the 21st century, right? We have to remember that they're always going to be the worst headsets of this century every time they come out. And they're going to get more and more improvements. That's what's so interesting about this whole pipeline that you're discussing, David, right? Like you would imagine that Apple would eventually want to empower creators with some handheld device to capture the types of videos that you're seeing in VR to begin with on something like Apple Immersive Video. And like every other platform is going to be trying to do the same thing. But because Apple has this end-to-end integrated system, they might be able to do some special things or some things first there.
Yeah, it's a very interesting question to wonder, will Apple ever put a 180-degree lens in the back of an iPhone and try to do, a 180-degree version of this? Because Apple Immersive Video, to be clear, is 180-degree video. And I had a commenter here asking, does 180 help this? And yeah, it does. It halves the requirement, right? So 8K 180-degree stereo is doable. Will get you the display resolution of Quest 3, right? So you can match Quest 3's display resolution with 3D 8K video if you just have 180 degrees. It's one of the big issues with 360-degree video is you just need so many pixels. But the other way Apple could do it is release a dedicated device, as you say, and that would allow for 360. But I can't ever see Apple releasing a camera that isn't an iPhone unless it's a wearable.
That's tough. Okay, so the example in my mind is the kid, my kid out on the soccer field, running from one end of the soccer field to the other. It's no parents out there on the soccer field can capture those videos of their kid capturing the goal. If you take a tripod, set it up on the side, and use the center stage software that is like rolling out on multiple platforms. I think it was Meta's feature first, right? That was one of the things we kind of pointed out that Portal did before anybody else, I believe, was track the person in the frame and center on them using the extra resolution. But you can imagine using all those lenses on the back of an iPhone to get the full frame of a field from left to right, and then just zoom in on your kid going back and forth across the whole soccer field, and you've got a video of your kid of only your kid out there on the soccer field. That's the opposite of what some of these studios are doing to capture a whole baseball game, right? Like at some point we want to have a whole soccer game where you can pick like a whole professional MLS or English soccer match. You can actually go out on the center line and be in the middle of the action as all the players go around you and every movement is exactly as they performed it in the game. That's so many years away from processing into reality, right? They can do it hypothetically with a whole server farm and a whole bunch of cameras around the space, but doing it at these resolutions that David and I are talking about, like it's still many years away from even home use. How you doing, David?
Yeah, I just had to reconnect there. My headset dropped out. Do you want to recap what you just said, or even give a quick summary so I can respond, or do we want to?
It's weird. It's really bizarre to see that David rejoins the studio after reconnecting, but his avatar loaded in separate to his wireframe body. So as he's like he's asking me to recap what happened while he's gone. He's reanimating into existence from like the inside out in front of me. I can't focus, David. What are the commenters saying?
Yeah, people are just pointing out some of the issues with 360 video. Again, some people sort of saying what I was saying about you need a lot of pixels for it. George Jorgensen's also saying it takes control away from the director. you never really have someone, if you put someone in a 360-degree video, normally they don't look anywhere other than in the front 270 degrees, right? Nobody ever looks behind them, or very rarely do they. You have to kind of say, oh yeah, look behind you, and someone will bother to. I don't think, I said this on X a while ago, I think 180 degrees is not immersive enough, and 270 degrees is ideal, because 360 is just impractical. Not only, imagine trying to film 360 video, right? Yes, we're talking about a 360 camera here. And just the fact that if you're trying to actually build a story with it, you have to make sure everything around it is clear. It's completely different from a traditional production pipeline. If you just have that 90 degrees in the back cut out, very rarely will people ever look all the way behind them anyway. And you can, save in a lot of pixels, but that's not what the formats are right now. There's VR 180 and then there's 360. A lot of people saying how VR 180 is great, and, asking about 180 degree cameras. There is someone pointing out Canon makes the EOS VR that's 8K 180 degree stereo, so it's 3D 8K 180 degree. It's thousands of dollars though. It's another example of how, yes, these products exist, but what's special about this one is that it's such a low cost relatively.
Would you? How do I frame this? Do you think that Apple considers the spatial video resolution, bitrate, and size, as well as their Apple Immersive Video, 180 XVR based tech, at that resolution? Do you think they consider that the minimum bar for comfort in viewing this type of content?
Yeah, I think in many ways, Vision Pro is what Apple considers the minimum bar for VR and AR, right? It's like every aspect of it, from the software to the hardware, is the bar that they want to set. And I think they wouldn't go for 360-degree video for all the reasons we're pointing out, and the fact that it just wouldn't look good. You don't have enough resolution. You would have to somehow, have a 16K pipeline, which is just ridiculous by today's standards. Yeah, and there's some people are in support of 360. They're saying there are ways you can direct the person to look behind them. Some Sampler 19 says only 360 is real.
One of the videos that I've tried to block out from my memory was at a Los Angeles conference where I think I had to lay in a coffin or a casket, and then the headset was put on me, and I experienced death, and then the cadavers table. Like I was killed in a hotel room or died of a heart attack in the thing, and yeah, that was like a director taking complete control of your perspective and trying to play with it, right? Like that's the most produced 360 content that we've seen in years, and there hasn't been, I don't know, it wasn't the right bit rate and resolution on the right displays to really, it just didn't feel great.
Yeah, I think we can wrap this part up just by recapping on what you were saying just before I disconnected, which is that we still really are in the early days of this technology. Yes, this was introduced to the consumer market, all of this kind of stuff back in 2014, 2015, 2016, but we're really only just in the last few years, and arguably, this year in some ways with Vision Pro, getting to the minimum quality bar of this no longer looks terrible. I think Quest 3 and Vision Pro, from a headset perspective, go past the boundary with their pancake lenses that headsets before just had that kind of blurriness to them. The 360 videos we're only seeing now with the 180 degree videos with Apple Immersive Video are only pushing past the boundary. YouTube VR only just got support for 8K. We're just starting to get the foundations for this sort of stuff, and it's still not good enough, right? Because of course, everyone in the comments says, I don't care because it's not 3D yet. That's what we want. That's what we want ideally. Well, ideally what we want is a stick like this that has this form factor that generates a depth map from what it's seeing and lets you look around in it. That's the end goal here. The end goal eventually, sometime in the 2030s, is you get a stick like this, you stick it down, you capture the scene, and then you can actually, look around it. And that's going to be something that's going to be delivered with machine learning. It's something that every big tech company is researching. It's just a matter of, today doing this takes a, really high-end GPU on someone's server 6 hours to do 5 minutes of video or something like that. Whereas someday that has to run on a chipset, either in the device or even in real time in the headset. And it's just a matter of we're, several generations down the line until that sort of onboard compute's available.
I think, well, yeah, we should move on. But I think of what Project Starlight was, and this. There's another way of thinking of like what the end goal here is. I'm wondering, how do you do a spatial recording, spatial presentation live, headset to headset? How do you have two spatial windows at two ends of a conversation, and neither person is wearing a headset necessarily, or they are wearing a headset, and you're providing like all the environment around them in the same 3D way as the headset. There's also capturing the whole environment around the person and how you stream that over the network live with other people. I'd like to see that stuff get really interesting really fast, I think, before I necessarily want those types of captures.
Yeah, we'll have to come back to this at another day, but it is a very interesting question as to right now when you hang out with someone as spatial personas in Vision Pro, you see them in your home, but they don't see your home. They see their home. You're all in your own room. You're just kind of overlays. If you get in a virtual environment, you all see the same thing, right? You're all in the same virtual environment. And that's something that all these headsets have been able to do for years. Obviously, you're just in a video game, essentially. There's no complexity there. But how do you go to someone else's home? That's one of the dreams of mixed reality headsets and AR glasses, that you can have someone teleport onto your couch and they're there in the room. That's going to require like a not only a scene capture, but a continuously updating real-time scene capture that has, it's not impossible when you think about it. If you look at what Vision Pro already does continuously, is it creates this high resolution 3D mesh of your environment. Quest 3 does it not continuously, but does it once per room setup, right? Vision Pro is already creating the geometry for this. It's not, very high detail, but it's there. All they would technically have to do, I say all, this is obviously harder than it sounds, is then add color on top of that, essentially kind of like real-time photogrammetry. I suspect the biggest barrier to this may not be technical right now at Apple, but maybe privacy. I think letting someone visit your home and essentially do like a real-time capture of everything around you presents privacy issues that Apple doesn't want to quite touch on. But that would be a crazy demo, right? Imagine, Vision OS 3 or whatever comes out and you have a spatial persona call with someone and you're in their room, and they can actually pick up something and say, look at this thing. That would be, it's science fiction. It's the stuff of science fiction.
And I honestly, like, I appreciate you pointing out like that we are pretty close there. There are moments. There's a little twist on that you mentioned where like I was doing this week where my kid is being shown through the people detection in Pastor, right? So they're standing right here, and the exact same, like, I could change the functionality of the headset just by pressing the button right here and switch to a spatial capture of him right here. It's just one more step to imagine him being beamed into the room with all the other spatial like personas in the space with us. So like I've had situations where someone out there sees like someone in VR in a codec or in a Apple persona is watching my view of a person in my room with me and talking to them through me. And that's could get a lot better over time with this sort of capture technology.
Yeah, it's stuff that it's definitely quite far out, but it's crazy to think about it. I mean, the problem with people, complex 3D objects like people, is you're only seeing one angle of them, right? They can't be beamed in 3D without some sort of neural network hallucinating what the rest of their head looks like. And that's something that can be done, right? We've seen companies like NVIDIA show off demos of this. It's not impossible. It's just putting all this together on something that actually runs in real time on a headset is crazy. And Craig Melville's pointing out that on iPhone, the LiDAR sensor has an accuracy of like 2 to 5 centimeters. Vision Pro's is better than that, but it's still not great, right? The 3D mesh you get from a Vision Pro or a Quest 3 is the resolution is on the order of centimeters, right? As in the, per cell division. This is not a really, really high resolution map that you're going to see extreme details in, but you could imagine visiting like a really coarse version of someone's room with current technology.
And people are doing it, right? Like you can do this today, right now, and we have seen demos of people cutting
Well,
across the room in different ways.
okay, yes. So what people do is they create a static capture using photogrammetry on their phone, and then they upload that as a 3D model onto the headset, and you're visiting as a virtual environment. That's something people have done. Yes, it's a completely different kettle of fish to talk about doing that in real time from the headset.
Kettle of fish. That's straight from Northern Ireland. Thank you for that, David. All right, what's the next subject? Let's stop talking about the thing we weren't sponsored by.
Yeah, I mean, well, I was going to bring up one comment of it. Artful is just saying they have an Insta360. I assume the previous model, the 5K version, and they use it to record their bike rides out here in the UK. So that's pretty cool. I mean, that's the advantage of this, right? You may say, "Oh, I don't care about 360 video that's not 3D," but when it's your own memories, your own experiences, that's pretty cool. You know, you go and do an extreme sport, and you can put on your headset and experience that and see your family around you. I think that could be quite compelling. But yeah, we'll stop talking about that. I promise we're genuinely not small. It's just, I personally really like seeing technology that takes something that used to cost $3,000 and make it $500. I think that's cool. That's the best part of technology, is when prices come crashing down for the same basic functionality. But yes, let's talk about the next topic, which is the claim about Meta's AR glasses. So this comes from Meta's head of AR glasses hardware, who was previously, before 2022, when they became head of AR glasses hardware, they were previously the head of VR hardware for the original Oculus Rift consumer version, Oculus Touch, Oculus Go, Oculus Quest, Rift S, Quest 2, and Quest Pro. So they left to the AR division, or AR team, I guess, right before Quest 3 was in development. So that was, Quest 3 is the first headset out from Meta where they are not the head of VR hardware. And their claim here, obviously they are biased, being that they are literally the person building it, but they are claiming that trying these AR glasses gives you the same, and I quote, "Oh my God, wow, I can't believe this" reaction as trying the original Oculus Rift. It's unclear whether in that quote she meant the Oculus Rift developer kit or the consumer version. I suspect she meant the development kit. I suspect what she means by this is back in 2012 or 2013, when you put on the duct tape prototype or the DK1 and you saw high field of view in the context of previous headsets were like, 40, 50, 60 degrees at this kind of price. You saw, 100 degrees field of view, really low latency, non-terrible, good VR for the first time. Most people's reaction was, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. How can this be possible in something that's going to cost a couple $100?" Right? That is the reaction. There's a great story from Blake Harris's The History of the Future, where Oculus was demoing to someone in the US military, and they said something like, "How much is this going to cost?" And they said, I think 200. And the US military guy said, "Only 200,000. Wow, that's really impressive."
Yeah.
So that's how amazing the original Rift was compared to stuff before. Like this idea of having, a couple $100 for a 100-degree field of view VR headset was a crazy idea, and it spawned the entire modern VR industry that we are all seeing the fruits of today. But so their Meta's head of AR hardware is claiming that trying these glasses gives the same reaction. However, what's more importantly unclear is whether she is referring to the demonstrator glasses that Meta reportedly plans to show off later this year, or the downgraded consumer product that they reportedly plan to release in 2027. When it comes to the idea of Meta releasing a demonstrator product that is too expensive to ever turn into an actual consumer product, a demonstrator hardware, that's not really in the realm of rumor anymore. Andrew Bosworth essentially confirmed that in an interview with The Verge's Alex Heath, and Alex Heath was the person who wrote about this. So when Heath interviewed Bosworth back in December, he essentially confirmed it, right? So some point later this year, we expect Meta to show off AR glasses that are so advanced that they can't be turned into a product because the components behind them are so expensive and difficult to build.
Can't be turned into a product by Meta.
can't be turned into a product by anyone because the micro LED displays of this kind of resolution, there is no manufacturing pipeline for it, right? We're talking all the time on this show about micro OLED and how difficult those are to produce, right? That's a technology that has existed for quite some time. The problem is just about scaling it up. And we'll talk at the end when we talk about Vision Pro, how important that is for the VR industry and the headsets of the future. But like when we're talking about micro LED, this is a completely new display technology, right? People have become so desensitized by all of these micro mini names because the vast majority of them are just variants of LCD, right? All this mini LED nonsense. It's all just LCD with a fancy backlight. Pretty much half of the display technology you will ever hear about is LCD with a fancy backlight. Then you've got OLED, which is of course its own completely distinct thing, different from LCD. And that's what we're seeing, micro OLED powering headsets like Vision Pro. Micro LED is a completely new display technology. Again, it is a third display technology. It is not in any product right now.
You did this. You made a chart for this, didn't you? Like we talked about a chart at some point. It's like buried somewhere in some article where I swear he just said the same term 3 times in a row. Like I'm sure. Like I tried to understand the difference, but you said micro LED and micro OLED. Like
these are all quite confusing, right? The confusing part is that these variants of LCD, like mini LED, have been named to try and confuse you, right? The manufacturers of these TVs, of these headsets and all, they want you to think that mini LED is a brand new display technology. It's LCD with a fancy backlight, right? That's what is in Quest Pro. That's what's in a lot of high-end TVs. You go and see these TVs and they're like, it's QLED, mini LED. It's just LCD with a fancy backlight. But OLED is its own thing, and micro LED, micro LED is a completely new thing again. The only products you can find it in are like $100,000 TVs. There are giant televisions that are something like 130 inches that you can buy for $100,000. That's the only product that this display technology even exists in.
Are we to assume that they're going to target 100+ degree field of view on this demonstration?
So that's the other aspect that makes this expensive. It uses silicon carbide waveguides. And apparently because of the export restrictions on this around military dual purpose use, because of how these are used in things like radars, they have to be assembled in the US. So if you want to build a product using silicon carbide waveguides, you will get to something like 70 degree field of view, not 100. Nobody can reach 100 degrees in glasses form factor today. That's just science fiction at this point. But at 70 degrees...
Why do I care about this?
Because that's a lot wider than anything. But like if a VR headset that you're in has a diagonal field of view well over 100 degrees, right? If you're in glasses that have a 50 degree field of view, like Nreal, you're only going to see virtual objects in this little postage stamp in front of you, and you pan around the room and you'll lose object permanence, right? You'll be like, you do not have object permanence. You look away from an object and it no longer exists. It's as if these objects are all ghosts that you can only see by looking directly at them. They're not there in your room like if you're in a Quest 3. If I'm in a Quest 3, the virtual objects are within 108 degrees of my field of view. But yeah, to clarify and to stop rambling here, the demonstrator product will have reportedly 70 degree field of view, but I keep saying product, the demonstrator hardware that they will not turn into a product. They will show it off. They will give it to some select developers, but it will just be the point of this demonstrator, I think, is to justify the tens of billions of dollars of spending on the metaverse. Most of that spending is on building these things, right? This is for investors, I think. This is to show investors, look what we built, look what will be possible in 2030s. Yeah. It's the point. It's a North Star. AR glasses are possible. Now, not possible in the sense that this can actually be a product that we can sell, but possible in we can actually assemble this thing. Like Andrew Bosworth, again, the CTO of Meta, his claim is that this is the most advanced thing we've made as a species, in the realm of consumer electronics. That's a massive claim. And it's possible that it may come true if what we're hearing is accurate. But the huge problem is that in 2027, when they actually release an AR glasses product, reportedly, it's not going to have micro LED displays. It's not going to have silicon carbide waveguides. It's going to use LCOS, which is basically like a reflective LCD micro display, and glass waveguides. So it's going to have the same field of view as a HoloLens 2 or an Nreal headset, but in a glasses form factor. And that's going to be, I think this is going to be a really strange thing to see from Meta. You're going to have them show this amazing glasses that everyone goes, wow, this is amazing. And potentially we'll get to try to connect. I think it's very possible we get to try to connect. To be clear, we have no insider information of that. That's just complete speculation. But then 2 years down the line, or 3 years down the line, actually, 3 years later, they will come along with a product and it'll be worse in every way.
Well, all right. So I think we've got to transition to the last subject here pretty quickly, even though there's a lot to get into on this one, because I need to talk about resource starvation. It's a term I've heard internally. I think I saw it in the Blake Harris book, but I've heard it amongst my sources in talking about how Meta and Facebook before it manages multiple projects and just chooses to kill some of them. And like we need to discuss the last subject here today, to discuss the subject of, what is Meta really spending its money on, and how much is that going to continue into the future?
So we actually have 3 subjects left. So
oh my gosh.
Yeah, we have next we'll talk about Horizon OS, then we'll talk about Apple Vision Pro production, and then finally we'll talk about Vision Pro 2. So I'll finish up with a couple of comments there and we can move on. So Sharon B is claiming Apple will produce the first pair that actually work. Apple reportedly indefinitely shelved its AR glasses project last year. This is a really, really hard product to bring to life. This is a moonshot, right? This is like the moon landing level difficulty. This is taking something from science fiction and making it into reality. Making standalone AR glasses that are actually compelling and don't suck is going to be one of the hardest technological achievements in the history of mankind. Look at the size of a pair of glasses. You have to put a display system, the sensors and the compute and all of that into a pair of glasses. It's an insane challenge. It's what Meta has been spending tens of billions of dollars a year on. Tens of billions. That's like more than was spent on the Manhattan Project when you actually sum it all up.
And the Apollo project, right? Like it's on that scale. And it goes to this thing that I don't. All right, so let's start to begin to do that transition to the Horizon sort of starvation thing.
Let me just finish. Yeah, we'll just finish up and then we can move directly on. There's just one other thing here. There are people in the comments talking about the other glasses line from Meta, the Ray-Ban Meta glasses, and the fact that the 2025 model will reportedly have a small HUD. So to be clear, we're just talking about AR glasses here, glasses that can put virtual objects into your space, right? You can actually, put a Pokemon on the ground and walk around and it's on the ground. Like what you get with mixed reality, except through a transparent display system that's additive. When it comes to the Ray-Bans, that's a separate product line that, yes, reportedly they will put a HUD in, but that's not going to put virtual objects in your room. That's going to let you see notifications and get answers from Meta AI with text and, things like that. And just the same kind of information you might get on a smartwatch. It's not the same thing as virtual objects, but that is very much so good to point out that we will see affordable HUD glasses long before we see affordable AR glasses. Shalask is pointing out people often confuse smart glasses with AR glasses. But yeah, do we want to talk about Horizon OS, or do you have any?
So I'll begin the transition here with my context here of meeting Mark Zuckerberg at the end of, I think it was 2022 now. And he talked about his platforms that he planned to invest in the future. And he talked about the wristband, the Control Labs wristband as an input mechanism. He talked about Horizon, and he talked about AR and VR. What I wonder about is this Horizon OS switchover, and whether it indicates Meta has moved on in any way from VR.
Well, I think the news here kind of suggests no, because one of the first reactions you got from some people to this news was, does this mean Meta isn't going to make headsets themselves? Are they just going to make the software and hope other people do? And not only did Meta confirm that they will continue to make Quests, Mark Zuckerberg's comment here is that he says that Quests will still be the most popular headsets after Horizon OS is available to third parties. So he is coming out here saying that the Meta Quest headsets, the first party Horizon OS headsets, will still sell the most units. And the reason behind that isn't just like blind hubris. He's not saying, oh, we can do this so much better than everyone else. He's just saying that they're going to be the ones that are subsidized. They're going to be the ones that are, $300, $500. Whereas, as John Carmack pointed out, these other headsets from Asus and Lenovo and LG and etc., they're going to be a price with a hardware profit. So they're going to be, according to Zuckerberg, for specific use cases. And Andrew Bosworth described Quest headsets in the context of Horizon OS as the most general purpose. These are going to be the jack of all trades Quest headsets. They're not specifically optimized for gaming. They're not specifically optimized for productivity. They're not specifically optimized for fitness, and they're not specifically optimized for media watching, but they can do all of them okay, right? And then the idea is that you'll get a Horizon OS headset that's optimized for work. So it might have micro OLED displays and an external battery, so you can sit down at a desk with it with the lightest possible weight. You'll have another one that's designed for gaming, and it might have a battery on the rear, an elite strap style solution built in, and better cooling and some things like that. You'll then have one optimized for fitness. So these are going to be like, this will be the jack of all trades, and these other companies are only coming in to do like the people that just use their headset for mainly one thing. And that's a lot of people. There are a lot of people who pick up a headset for like fitness, for example, and that's what they use. You reported on this before. There are people who just use Supernatural. If they can go and get a, I don't know what company's going to produce it, whatever company's going to produce a fitness headset, and that's sweat into it, and it's designed to be lightweight. Right? Yeah, and it's only designed to run for 1 hour, because that's, you're not going to do like an intense cardio workout for more than an hour. Or maybe you will, but I don't think many people will. That's something that you can then sacrifice weight. But that's the news here. Zuckerberg is just kind of being clear on this, and Bosworth are being clear on this. This is the general purpose headset. The other ones are for specific use cases.
Yeah, the issue I kind of have is none of them, like, what content do you create on these headsets?
You mean what
work do you do?
I mean, you use them to connect for the foreseeable future. It means productivity in the sense of Horizon Workrooms, where it turns your laptop into a triple monitor setup. That's what it means. The same way that in Vision Pro, a huge focus is connecting to your Mac. This is turning your PC into. And the ironic thing is, as I pointed out before, Horizon Workrooms can turn a Mac into a triple monitor setup, and Vision Pro can't. That's a really strange situation we're in. But that's what he's talking about here. He's talking about in this image. I'll just bring up here. Hopefully the comments, everyone can see it. They're talking about the bottom left quadrant here, where you're this is obviously a horrendous mock-up that doesn't mean anything. This is just an artist conception, but it's sitting in a desk. An artist
conception looks very similar to some things we know, right?
Yeah, it looks like exactly like Vision Pro. Exactly, yeah. That's what they mean by work, because for the foreseeable future, you're not going to get any work that done standalone unless your work could already be done on a Chromebook, as in everything is web-based. Productivity on Horizon OS natively means web apps today.
Yeah. And I think that's where I'm going with this, web apps, right? What is Meta's web app surface attack on this competition? How do they use the web to their advantage to pry open these last few platforms for their advantage? How do they compete with the integrated approach that Apple's doing and with what Google has to offer over on its platform with this new ecosystem of devices? And the thing that, like this, what I see here is an overlay. And I thought about a lot, David, is we have experienced overlays, multiple overlays in the past in VR. There was a Windows mixed reality overlay. There's a Steam VR overlay. There was the Oculus overlay, Vive overlay. So there's all these dashboards, these bars that appear around you to manage your whole experience. And you have, your settings over here, your menu, your virtual desktop. that still exists. Like that is what you get out of Steam VR right now. It's the core interface of the MetaQuest ecosystem in standalone. I have had this experience in the past, even last weekend, of having multiple dashboards in my space. And it's not a great feeling to have multiple of them. And I feel like that's what Meta Horizon OS is doing with its ecosystem. They're going to allow other companies to run a second dashboard in addition to Meta's own dashboard and social services.
I don't
But
see that
it's,
happening.
you don't think that's going to happen?
I don't see them being able to do anything like that. I think this is like, I mean, it's a big open question. That's the one thing we don't know about this strategy. Can these companies pre-install their own software? Because the best analogy to what's happening here is Windows, right? Imagine a parallel universe where Microsoft had sold first-party PCs with Windows from the start and then opened it up. That's kind of what we're seeing here. What happened with Windows, obviously, is anyone will know who bought a budget laptop or even unfortunately, some high-end Windows laptops, is that it was for a very long time and still in many ways absolutely bunged with OEM crapware, right? Full of just manufacturer crapware that slowed down the system, bloated everything up, a million pop-ups when you started it up. And one of the recommended things to do when you get a Windows PC today is go in there and click Power Wash, and then it'll actually take all that up and bring you back to like a factory default.
Power Wash your PC. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah,
I very much enjoy when David Heaney talks about a very bad experience with technology. I hope you and our audience enjoy his takedowns of technology as well, because I definitely enjoy them in the studio. Yeah, I think that's where I'm going with this, David. Like, is this a nightmare scenario for updates, for adware, for surfaces? Like you've read my draft editorial where I'm going with this, what's framing my thinking right now. All I'm thinking about in Windows, like even today, when Microsoft uses various areas of Windows constantly to try to push their services on you in various ways. How many times have you rejected the Edge request to make Edge your default browser on Quest? How many of you have been annoyed by the Bing AI little pop-ups, the weather little pop-ups, right? All of those surfaces could be surfaces now for Meta's partners.
Yeah, well, we just don't know. It's possible that Meta doesn't allow them to do that. It's possible that they're only making the hardware. They have to make a hardware profit, and Meta controls the software completely. It's possible that you load up one of these headsets, and it's from a software experience identical to using a Quest. You don't have any Lenovo software. You don't have any Asus software. We don't know. We just don't know yet. They haven't confirmed anything like that yet.
Yeah.
We don't know is the answer. Now, when it comes to things like advertising in the system and trying to push all of these services, the advantage Meta has over Microsoft is that the reason Microsoft's doing that is because they don't make any money from consumers out of Windows, any recurring extra money. Because yes, there's a Windows App Store, but almost nothing uses it because it is a literally open platform. And that's how Windows is. Well, it's open in the sense of you go onto your web browser, you download a installer and you run it, right? That's not how you get software for Quest. You go to the Quest store or you use something like SideQuest to sideload from a PC. You can't go into the Quest browser, download an APK and install it. That's not how Quest works. That's not how Horizon OS works. So Meta does get that 30% store cut when you go and purchase software. It's the same thing on your iPhone, same thing on your Android phone. The model on Windows is so divorced from that. Even Mac, right? Apple has put a huge amount of investment into trying to get the Mac App Store to be the place for software, but still a huge percentage of software distribute to the website. You go to a website, you download an installer, and you install it. That's the reason that Microsoft has to try and push all of these services on you. Meta's not going to have that pressure because you buy a Asus headset or an Lenovo headset. When you go and buy Beat Saber, well, Meta gets all of that money. When you go and buy someone else's game, Meta gets 30% of the money. They don't need to do that sort of thing.
But I think where I'm going with this, David, is what you've just described is Meta wants the money for the metaverse. They want the dollars off of VR apps. They don't care about the flat surfaces that are everywhere. What I'm reading in this is they're willing to like give away the flat surfaces to anyone that wants them in favor of them getting as much as they possibly can out of the full virtual worlds. And that feels like advertising space to me.
Well, I mean, why would it have to be advertising space? It's just, as you say, that it's just the existing web. It's a web browser. If the website is run by advertising because it's a free service, that's going to be the case across your phone, across your PC. It doesn't change. And you're right in saying that they would allow, Meta has said multiple times, they would allow Google to put the Play Store on Horizon OS and Google gets to keep the 30% cut of all 2D apps. You're right to say Meta is completely willing to cede that, but I don't think this is like an ideal world solution. It's not like Meta saying, if Meta could press a button and have every Play Store developer publish their apps onto a Horizon OS 2D store, they would do it tomorrow, right? It's just the difficulty is that you can't do that. It's like trying to get all of these Android apps is like trying to start a new phone platform. It's like trying to start a third phone operating system. You have to convince every developer that right now doesn't give a shit about Horizon OS. They don't care about headsets. They're designing their apps to be used on phones, and if you're lucky, tablets. I mean, Apple and Google have had a hard time to even get phone developers to build their apps in such that they will work well on tablets. Getting a completely new surface, it's just not really practical. That's why like Apple's huge strategy with Vision OS is to give you a huge percentage of the iPad App Store and the iPhone App Store. It's why we expect Google will do the same with their headset. It's the biggest weakness of Quest and Horizon OS is that they don't have those 2D apps. And as you say, the solution to that is that they're going to let you connect to your PC or use the web.
Is it Townscaper, the one that you were surprised launched on Quest recently? Is that the name of the game?
It's Townsman VR. Yeah, it was on Quest 3, but not Quest 2, and then they released it for Quest 2 a few months ago.
Okay, never mind. That's a different subject I'm thinking about. But there's how is it like advertising space? So this is my philosophical thing that I want to get across to our viewers, and this is the whole idea. Did anyone go and try to use Helldivers to play? Was it Helldivers 2 on Xbox cloud streaming back when it was peaking? Right when it launched, right? I went and tried to do that on wired in a machine, and it told me it was like a 30-minute wait in a queue to get to Helldivers on a flat screen with an Xbox controller. What that queuing tells me is that the internet lines in the United States aren't built to support.
It's not the internet lines. It's that they don't have enough cloud Xboxes. Like every cloud Xbox is being used. That's how the service works, right? It's an Xbox Series X in a data center. It's a bunch of
same
Xboxes
difference.
in a data center.
It's the same. I'm talking about bandwidth. We're talking about bandwidth from the cloud to me.
Sure, but it's not bandwidth. It's the amount of consoles. The cloud isn't magic. It's just a bunch of Xbox
If you doubled the number of consoles, you're telling me that there would be enough internet pipes to get them all to my house?
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So this is we'll see how network congestion works, but like I get what you're saying, that you're waiting for someone to basically log off to get onto another one. Yeah. But like, what about the rural people who are very far from the servers, right? Like you've got that situation as well, competing at the very same time.
Cloud gaming simply can't work for a rural situation unless maybe through low altitude satellites like Starlink if you go directly to satellite, but again, it's even that it's unlikely. Realistically, as I've said before, the best model for cloud gaming would be on a city per city basis, where some company needs to have the balls to say, if you're not in a city with a data center, if you're not within range of a data center, we're not going to sell you this service. And then that company would have the quality. They would have a reputation for quality. People would say, oh, this cloud gaming service always works, because it would be a selection bias situation where only the people near the data center even get to try it.
Yeah. So what you have there, what you're starting to talk about is the way that cell companies roll out new cell networks, right? They launch 4G in 3 cities in the United States, then they roll out a bunch of infrastructure to roll it out in 50 more states. And the whole time, right, like they're eating their old cell towers and decreasing performance on old devices to make the bandwidth for the new devices. Like all this is the reason I'm focusing so much on this is there is another way, right? There is a way for you to host a world on a PC in your house for people to visit externally. You can do it with WebXR. You could do it with things like high fidelity back in the day. And you can do it with things like Steam VR today. but you're not. I don't see the route to doing that with Horizon. I see Horizon always trying to host your world on their servers and then trying to do cool things with the stuff being on their servers. But I don't understand how my files, my gigabytes of view-centric videos all get fed to Meta's cloud only to come right back to my headset. Right? Like it doesn't make sense to be capturing all these 3D models, all these videos, all these photos, and have to send it all off to the cloud and then back again to process it. Like I don't understand that model. So how does Meta exist in this scenario where like a lot of the stuff you make or do needs to always make this trip out to the server and back?
Well, a lot of it doesn't, right? Like you record on a Quest and the recording is saved to the headset, right? But yes, there are some tasks where you would want to do cloud processing. I think one of the things
I want to
right
pull
now,
out a ray gun and blow a hole in that wall over there, right? That's the world I want. I want tools like I have in Steam VR Home that impact the world around me. How does Meta create a Horizon OS in which that happens?
I'm unclear what you're saying. Isn't that Horizon Worlds? Isn't Horizon Worlds?
Ooh, interesting. So yeah, so like Improbable. Improbable is the model in my mind. We've talked about Improbable before. They had this pitch many years ago of having thousands of entities, thousands of interactions, just absurdly large number of online things all affecting each other in real time. You have things like No Man's Sky where a couple people could be on a planet shaping the world together in real time. But there's limits to the type of hardware you can run something like No Man's Sky on. And Horizon Worlds is trying to do the same thing from like basic shapes. What I'm asking is like, you look at Ready Player One, right? The big finale scene at the end where everyone's bringing their own vehicle, their own avatar, their own bombs and artifacts to this giant battle at the end of the virtual world. How do we get to a virtual world where you actually can bring your own toys like that to affect the experience with everyone else? Like on VR Chat, they've got beautiful avatars and they've made worlds that are games, but they don't have this thing that I'm talking about that's similar to No Man's Sky. And I have to think that's what they want to build with Horizon.
I still, can you be clear on what does VR Chat not have that you're asking for here? What is VR
How
Chat
do you
Rec Room and
mold
Horizon
the
Worlds?
environment? How do you literally mold the environment and leave a lasting impression in a world inside VR
okay,
Chat?
so you're talking about like procedural destruction and procedural. I mean, in Rec Room and Horizon Worlds, there's the foundation for that, right? Because these in VR Chat, when you build a world, you build it in Unity, then you export it, and then you load it in. So sure, you can have dynamic objects, but a lot of stuff is baked, right? You have the baked lighting, baked geometry. What makes Rec Room and Horizon Worlds interesting is that the majority of those worlds are completely dynamic. They're built inside VR from scratch. That is what Horizon Worlds and Rec Room are today, right? And you can implement that kind of destruction in those. Obviously, when it comes to something like procedural destruction, you're just talking about, more complicated shaders. There's nothing fundamentally like impossible there. It's just that your graphics today suck for that because you're on a standalone headset and you're doing, these things quite, you're trying to do it as computationally efficiently as possible. But ironically, the answer to this, if you want to see how do you get Ready Player One, it's cloud rendering, right? That's how it's going to happen eventually.
So,
if you want that, you need to do the rendering in the cloud. You need to do something on a GPU that is much more expensive than even what you would have in a PC.
So let me take it a step further and mention specific titles here. Boneworks have hot dogs, horseshoes, and hand grenades. I can't think of any more right this second. But physically dynamic worlds where you've got a lot of layers of physics and a lot of objects around you.
There are games
Multiplayer ones where you can have lots and lots of objects around you.
Yeah,
what's the best one?
I mean, we have people in our comments pointing out that there's someone making a joke. It's called Minecraft.
Yeah, Minecraft. Voxels. Yeah, you went right to the voxel solution. The voxels are this freaking big, right? Like, I want voxels that are this freaking big.
Well, dude, this is nothing unique to VR, right? This is just a game question, right? This is like over time, games are getting more advanced. You can do more of this procedural stuff. You can do what you're talking about, leaving a lasting impression. That's called persistence. That's just an MMO. That's just where the state of the world is saved on a server and then loaded each time someone joins. Like it's these are just things that are going to happen over time. But the issue in the
Things
VR,
that are going to happen over time.
the
right?
issue in the VR context is you're trying to run all this today on a smartphone chipset, right? That's the issue in the context of standalone VR. And the solution is either PC VR or cloud rendering.
Here's why I'm harping on this, right? Like Meta has built a VR headset it needs. The Quest is the headset Meta needed to build to have a new computing platform. That's not necessarily the way you build new products that people like bond with in really personal ways, like use in like throughout their lives. They made a product that was a console-based system and didn't made you work through various layers to get access to your PC, and sure enough, now it's an open platform. I David went out of the headset and distracted me. What do you do? I've noticed people in our comments notice you typing away during the show. What do you type during our show, David?
I mean, I don't see anyone in our comments ever noticing that. I think it's you noticing that. It's me.
Someone is like, I always like that you do this thing where you're like, talk to me, and then you immediately go like this.
Yeah, I bring up a video. Usually I do it right before I bring up a video. It's me putting a video on in the background. I was bringing up some footage for context. And you just interrupt me. Continue speaking.
Sorry. Yeah, what I'm here. All right, here's the big thought is, right. So did Meta have a platform architect in charge at the right times to put all of Meta's pieces in the right places to take advantage of AR and VR in the right ways? What I'm wondering is whether Apple and Valve could own a lot of PC VR if they team up properly. How hard could they make it for Meta to do anything interesting in the PC space? Like, they haven't done anything interesting in the PC space for years. But we've got things like codec avatars coming that only run on PC. We've got things like this concept
right now. But what they're trying to do is get them to run on a headset, right? That's the thing. I mean, you say
years behind the competition at this point is what I'm trying to understand.
Like, at the competition for $3,500, they're trying to do it for $1,500 or something like that. It's not this. It doesn't matter if someone else does it at 3 times the price. And in a sense, in a market sense, right? Who's first doesn't matter. Who's first to making it because those fancy spatial personas that we love in Vision Pro don't matter if the person that you're talking to can't afford a $3,500 headset, right? Because the only way to view it's not even like you can view them in any other headset. The only way to see them is with the Vision Pro. So it's like a video phone that only you can afford.
That only talks to other video phones.
Yeah, exactly. Like, who are you going to talk to?
Ghostbusters. That's a funny joke because you do look like a ghost inside of those avatars. You're right. I get that, David. But like,
when it comes to Valve, Meta doesn't care about the PC, right? Like, they left. They want to do stuff,
and neither does Apple, right?
Exactly. That's what I keep trying to tell you. Apple doesn't care about PC either. They want a platform, Vision OS, an operating system. They don't care about, you can bring up your Mac, and that's kind of cool, and that's something they really care about, but not to run immersive applications, right? You're bringing up a 2D screen from your Mac.
So I'm at Apple's headquarters, and I found Phil Schiller, and I'm like, "What headset did you dev on? What headset do you use to run on your simulators at home?" He's like, maybe I shouldn't say that, right? I brought this up in the past. What I see in an Apple Vision Pro is something very similar to the Index. I see the frunk of an Index in the front-facing camera on this device, right? Like the whole external display, I saw what could have done that on the Index. And I almost feel like I would not have been surprised to imagine Apple used Indexes internally as a bar to judge against when in developing the Vision Pro. That's how similar these platforms feel.
Reported they used the Vive Pro, the HTC Vive Pro. That's the development hardware.
Well, let's see which one was on Schiller's head. That's the answer I want.
Yeah, but that's his home. It's his home system, right? And the reason he doesn't want to answer that is because he doesn't want to promote any other form of VR, right? To him, he's not going to talk about what he did realistically on a Windows PC, right?
you have a platform. You're arguing that Apple doesn't give a shit about VR,
They do,
and
just not PC VR.
then what does it harm them to add it as a first party like sibling to everything they do on their system? Like,
Because it makes it less likely that people will buy. They don't want you to buy content anywhere other than the App Store, right? It makes it so that if they're focusing on something they don't get any revenue from. If you go and buy something from Steam, Valve gets the 30% cut. The only company that is incentivized to give a shit about PC VR is Valve, and it's doesn't really give a shit about PC VR.
I don't.
Right? Like they get
I don't.
that's too harsh. They do. They release Steam Link, but they're not out there funding a bunch of VR games. They haven't released a headset in 5 years. You know, like the only company that is incentivized is Valve.
What I'm arguing is that Valve hasn't needed to. What I'm going to suggest is that Valve did open VR back in 2016. They added some social features to the system, and they fended off Windows Mixed Reality, Oculus, Samsung. They fended off the entire industry from making any money in PC VR except for via them. And it's like you're telling me that Apple's just going to do it alone? Like I know that's historically the narrative, but like you don't. It doesn't seem like it's a winning battle if you really want to act like Valve doesn't exist, and you've got MetaQuest already with the Steam Link app. Like it.
I mean, like it's a side feature on Quest, right? Like the thing you have to remember, and I always
it would be a side feature on Apple Vision Pro too.
Yeah, I know, but Apple is even more. It's like Apple is the company that lots of people imagine Meta is, right? There's always this idea of there's a lot of people who would have never ever expected that Meta would approve and promote Steam Link, because not only did Meta approve it, you had Andrew Bosworth saying this is great. For Meta, their goal right now is just user growth, right? They want as many people using the Quest headsets for now so that they can build up the ecosystem. Exactly what they're doing matters a little bit. Meta does generally want you on the store, but not so much that they're going to harm overall user growth by, making sideloading not allowed or not letting you use it as a PC headset. They're kind of a lot more relaxed. Apple doesn't care about users for now. They care about profit. Apple that's why they don't chase market share with the iPhone, right? Apple could probably release a $300 or $400 subsidized iPhone and murder the Android phone market, right? They could absolutely monopolize. They already have in the US, but it's a very wealthy market. Globally, the vast majority of people use Android phones. A MacBook as well. If Apple released a $500 subsidized MacBook, they would destroy Windows laptop sales, right? The people that go out there and buy a laptop because it's $500 or $300, they're not choosing Mac because they don't like it. It's that they don't want to pay the price, right? Apple doesn't care about users. They just want profit. And so when Vision Pro, they're not saying, I want more people using Vision Pro. They want people using Vision Pro on Apple services. If you look at what the product is, it's like they want you to subscribe to Apple Arcade. All of the best games are gated behind the Apple Arcade subscription. They want you to subscribe to Apple TV Plus. The Apple immersive video stuff is on Apple TV Plus. The 3D movies are on the Apple TV platform. They want you on their app store, subscribing to their services. They don't want you in anyone else's playground.
Yeah, I get all that. I think what I'm trying to understand is how the Mac versus the PC play into this. You framed the Mac as like a nice little virtual display, and you're right, but you have the chips underlying that and the technologies that they run. I recently went from an M2 to an M3 and saw what appeared to be a large number of my Steam games, flat Steam games, suddenly runnable because I went from the M2 to the M3. Is that did I see that right? Is there underlying technology that enabled that I missed?
Yeah, they're making big strides with GPU. I guess if it's the standard M3 and not like the M3 Max or whatever, I'd say runnable is probably the key word there. You're not putting these high settings or anything like that. I assume it's low and medium on big.
But this is
AAA
to
games.
Be clear. Like this is it was like I'm looking at my Steam library and a bunch of the games are grayed out on an M2 and they look like they're not grayed out when I go to an M3, and it's the same. It's the same installation of Steam on two different systems. I could be wrong on that. I didn't go. What I was surprised by was the number of games from my Steam library that are now running on modern Mac hardware. It's actually a significant amount of that library that is now somehow running through emulation layers of some kind.
Yeah, I mean, you have on Valve's part, they've been trying to get people away from Windows for years now. And Gabe Newell had this paranoia that Microsoft was going to lock down Windows any day, and make the Windows App Store the only way to get apps. And so that was what Steam machines were about. It's why he directed Valve to put a huge amount of resources from people and money into building up Linux and building Steam OS, and what you eventually got was the Proton compatibility layer that is what makes Steam Deck possible. And Apple recently has been doing a very similar thing where they have like their, I can't remember the exact name, like Mac Game Developer Kit or whatever it's called, that can easily let you convert Windows applications. These are Windows applications that are running in a different operating system. That's something that you're seeing happening in Apple. It's something you're seeing happening through Valve. It is something that Valve and Apple are aligned on, but only because they don't want people to be locked into Windows.
Mm. A lot of moving pieces, I think, is what I wanted to get our viewers to understand. There's the article that I've written that I'm working on with David to try to get out there. I went into SteamVR Home over the weekend and had some random people in graffiti my space in a photogrammetry capture from 2016. And what I realized was that yes, I used Steam account to make that happen, and yes, I used Apple to make that happen. But it was an open source connection between the Apple Vision Pro and the PC, and that's important, right? And there was a big connection, like there was AirLink over on Meta to connect what Meta Quests do to what PC does. What we're seeing here is like another layer of abstraction tear away, where a bunch of flat games, a bunch of flat videos, a whole universe of flat content is going to different devices in unexpected ways. It is getting ported to different screens around us by all of these different compatibility layers getting worked on invisibly. And like old truths that Macs don't play games aren't necessarily the same in modern day. Like it's different.
I think with Apple Silicon, right? Apple has put a much more focus on that, because in the past they had to rely on Intel's, integrated GPUs for most of their devices, and then you had like a dedicated GPU in some higher end MacBooks that.
What if an M4 ran Half-Life Alyx?
Well, I mean, in VR or not VR?
In VR.
I think it wouldn't be the M4 base model. It'd probably be like the M4 Pro or Ultra or Max or whatever the order of them is now. I think the current M3 Ultra probably could play Half-Life Alyx whichever one's the highest M1. I get so confused with Apple's naming. It goes Pro,
Max,
yeah. Ultra. Yeah, so the Ultra will, like, that's not obvious, but the Ultra already can run it. It's not an issue of running. It's not performance that's holding it back there. It's that, like, Valve dropped support for Steam VR on Mac a few years ago. Do you remember this happened? Like,
oh yeah,
we're going in the opposite direction. Steam VR used to run on Mac OS, and it doesn't anymore. It doesn't. Like, you pretty much can't do VR on a Mac, right? It's not something that you can do at all. You would have to like install Windows or install.
Well, that's Linux. that you can't, right? There's no Windows on an M chip does not exist. Right now.
That's supposed to be coming at some point, I think, in like a year or two, because Windows is the fifth attempt of Windows on ARM is happening now. Microsoft's tried to get Windows.
What about the flip of that? I mean, like that's where I'm going with that. What about Mac on Intel hardware, but not Mac hardware? Like Apple has regulatory bodies screwing with how they run their stores on iPhone. Why can't they open up Mac and just use that as a feeder into all the stuff that's happening on Vision Pro and iPhone?
The Mac already is open. It's not subject to the EU's regulations, because you can already go into Safari or Chrome, download a piece of software from the internet and run it. Like, it's already, in that sense, an open platform. Some people hate the idea of open being used for anything other than open source, but I do think this is the way in which you would call something open. To me, open source is a useful descriptor itself, but just open on its own means I can go into the web browser of this device and install an application, right? It's something you can't do on an iPhone unless you're in the EU and you go through like 15 different hoops. You can, and if you're in America on an iPhone, you can't. An iPhone is not an open platform, right? Quest, you can't do this, right? So Quest you could kind of call a semi-open platform, because you can do it, but only through plugging in your PC to your to your headset. So then you download the app on the PC and then you sideload it onto the headset. So you would call that kind of Quest is a semi-open platform in that sense. You can't do that with an iPhone, right? You can't, like, unless you're a developer that built the app. You can compile it from source, of course. That's completely different. But I can't download an iOS app on my PC and sideload it onto my iPhone. That's not how anything works.
Yeah.
But the Mac already is an open platform. Like, there's nothing stopping Valve from getting Steam VR running on Mac OS. It's such a different architecture to Windows and Linux that it was just a waste of investment time, because the vast majority of Macs aren't powerful enough to run the vast majority of Steam VR content.
Yeah, the vast majority of Macs of 2017 and 2018 is where I'm going with this, right?
I'd say even still, the base M2 and M3 are not powerful enough to run something like Alex, right? It's the M3 Pro or Max or Ultra or whatever you have to get to there,
Yeah.
And even then, like, laptops, there was a big sort of pushback a few years ago. Well, I say a few years ago, back in the Rift and Vive era, for VR laptops, but it's just not really practical, because you're trying to ever have them run at the kind of performance that you even need for VR. You had to have them plugged in anyway, so you lost the advantage of portability almost all the time. And then they would get so hot and thermal throttle. The reality is, like, PC VR content is designed to be played on a 400 watt beast, no more than 400 watts. I'm only talking about like 600, 800 watt beast in the corner that has these giant cooling fans that pushing air in a specific direction, and loads of space. These things are designed the completely opposite. I say design, built. Most people build their PC, right? I built my PC. I'm a huge PC gaming enthusiast myself. Like, you build something that is designed to not care about power draw, to dissipate a massive amount of heat and a massive amount of energy. That's not what a laptop is for. Like, look at the size of a MacBook, right? The MacBook Air doesn't even have a cooling fan, so you're never going to run a VR on that, because even if it was powerful enough, 5 minutes later it wouldn't be when it thermal throttles down. So the MacBook Pro, you get, obviously then you get a cooling fan, but the base model comes with 8 gigabytes of RAM. We're still in the scenario where even today, the vast majority of Macs that are sold are not powerful enough for VR.
Yeah, no, I totally get that. I think I'm just thinking about the platforms of the future, right? What does it look like 2, 3, 4 years ago, or 3 to 4 years from now, with games that are 3, 4, 8 years old? It's Apple has invested a lot in this chip layer, and if they've already sold you the chip, do they really care what you do with it? In what sort of platforms you run on top of it? If you can reset it back to Apple Silicon and go back to that secure boot drive that you've got at the core of the system, I don't know. Lots of things to think about with the future. I think we got 2 more subjects, David, and any interesting comments we should talk about?
Yeah, quite a lot of comments here. Some people, Spatial Big, saying my PC sounds like an aircraft taking off and landing. I think a lot of people would agree with that. Valdark saying that we say this as if the majority of market isn't multi-year-old games at the minute. Yeah, but they're still designed for a very high-end PC, right? Like, what people use PC VR for, simulators, for example, like, to run those at modern headset resolutions, to even run, like, DCS or Flight Simulator at Quest 3's resolution requires, like, a graphics card that alone costs $800 to $1,000 and dissipates 400 watts. It's just the PC is unashamedly high energy, and that's not what ultrabooks are focused on. Let's have a look at some of the comments here. Someone saying that their Index is still being used right next to their Quest 3. It ain't retired for them. Sharon B saying an open platform does not stop companies from finding a profit-making business model. Yeah, that's completely true, but it does constrain them. Yeah, a discussion here about whether PC VR is dead. That's going to have to be a discussion for another day. We've talked about this quite a lot. Yeah, I think we can move on to one of these, to our last 2 topics. Sorry. So, because we're approaching 2 hours at this point.
Yeah, I think we had a nice big discussion there on this subject, and it's not one that's going to go away anytime soon. We're going to get into this on a week in and week out basis on just how do these platforms kind of reposition themselves. But it we hear does it feel like a domino fell? It feels to me like a domino fell with the Apple Vision Pro release, and then all of these other things are more dominoes on a path to these platforms opening up a little bit because of a new platform emerging.
Yeah, for sure. Especially, well, with Mark Zuckerberg, he's trying to position himself as the open alternative to Apple, right? He wants to be the Windows to Apple's Mac. He wants to be the Android to Apple's iOS. And that's a lot of what this strategy around Horizon is. A lot of it is just also an optics thing rather than actually any specific strategy. Like as he admits, these headsets aren't going to ship more than Quest. To kind of just finish up on this topic, they're kind of token headsets in a way. These things are designed so they can say, we're not a closed model. Look, there's other headsets running our software, but these are going to be specifically for enthusiasts in quite a lot of ways. Alaska pointing out, even VR chat needs crazy power if you have more than one friend. Yeah, a lot of people have VR chat avatars that are horribly unoptimized, and a lot of PC worlds are not going to run at max frame rate unless you have a really powerful GPU. Not only is the PC platform unashamedly high energy, it's unashamedly high cost, right? Like to keep up with PC gaming is significantly more expensive than console gaming. That used to be a controversial thing to say like 15 years ago. It used to be the case that you could build a PC for a similar price to a console and still play all of the top games. GPU prices have inflated quite significantly after first the crypto boom and then the AI boom, to the point where some people maybe still disagree, but I think it's not. We're no longer in the era where you can build a PC for the same price as like a console. It's just, well, you can, but it's not going to be the kind of PC that you really want to take advantage of PC gaming. Ian's just disconnected there, so we'll just wait for him to come back. Jack B saying, if you can play freaking COD on a PC, you can absolutely slay the PC VR content that's out there. I'm sorry, but this is not true. It depends what you're talking about. If you want to play Beat Saber, sure. If you want to play Pistol Whip, sure. But if you want to play Elite Dangerous, Microsoft Flight Simulator, if you want to play, any of the racing games, they're all horribly unoptimized. You're talking about like significantly higher resolution than a typical PC game, right? If you look on the Steam hardware survey, the majority of people are actually still using a 1080p monitor. So you're talking about pushing 2 million pixels at most people have a 60 hertz monitor, so 60 frames per second, or sometimes you'll even less than 60, right? So you're talking about 2 million pixels at 60 frames per second. On a VR headset, you're doing more than that typically per eye, and you're trying to do it at like 90 or 100 frames per second. And not only that, but usually the field of view is wider as well. It depends obviously on the game. Some people like to have their field of view very wide. Also, a lot of the optimizations that game engines use for performance in flat games sacrifice a little bit of latency, and all of that is not used in VR. So you actually have the performance overhead for optimizing for latency rather than for raw throughput. So running a VR game is a lot harder than running a traditional game, and anyone will know this if they play a game that has VR support, as in you can play it on your PC and then boot it up in your headset at any time. Something like Flight Simulator, you can play it on your PC and you'd be like, oh, great performance. You put it on your headset and it's a laggy mess. It's a lot harder to render two eyes at a higher resolution than what most people are rendering just one view on. Multiple people in the comments pointing out the VR chat can bring people's PCs to their knees. Gigo, developer of Virtual Desktop, saying even when the most powerful PC, VR chat has trouble. Yeah, like even on this multi-$1,000 platform that dissipates hundreds of watts and is a giant box in the corner with a bunch of cooling fans pushing out the hot air as fast as possible, even then you can barely still keep up. It's like this is the simultaneously the great thing and the bad thing about PC gaming, right? That's what makes for the greatness, that what makes for the kind of graphics that are decades ahead of standalone, right? Meta is claiming that the Quest 3's GPU is only today catching up to the NVIDIA GTX 960 from back in 2015. So that wasn't even, the 960 obviously wasn't even the highest end GPU. I think it cost like what, $150, $200 back then. So today, the best standalone headset is only matching the like third or fourth best GPU from 10 years ago. So, that's what you get for this energy cost is graphical fidelity and simulation complexity that is just beyond standalone headsets' wildest dreams. Pastel the Devil asking a really interesting question. What kind of specialized headsets would you like to see come out? I'd love to see our commenters reply on that. If there's any specialized Horizon OS headset that you want. We're still waiting for Ian to come back, in case you're wondering why I'm just kind of almost stalling here. In the image here, you can see this is what Meta imagines a fitness headset might look like. And this is one that's designed for viewing videos, like watching movies. This is one that's designed for work. And this is one that's designed for gaming with, you see like a conceptual haptic vest and Saber-like controller. Obviously, these are all just concept images. These are not supposed to be specific products. Wabo was pointing out that they used PC VR on a 2060 laptop for years. What I would ask you, Wabo, is on what headset, though? What was the resolution of that headset? Did that headset have a 1K per eye resolution? Because we're now in the era of headsets with 2K per eye. And with Pimax Crystal and Vario Aero, you get 3K per eye. And then with Apple Vision Pro, you're all the way up to 4K per eye. So to actually take advantage of the headset's resolution, which is what you often want to do, so a Rift S is what you're saying you did. Yeah, so that's a 1.4K headset. We're now at like 2.2K headsets 2K in Quest 3 and Pico 4, and people are these days considering that a low resolution compared to the 4K Vision Pro. It's as the headset resolutions have gotten higher, to actually make use of those, the GPU requirements have had to go vastly up. So even if you're playing these old games, you're still trying to run them on a much higher resolution headset than you were back when you had that Rift Revive. And you point out, Wabo, that it's a fair point. However, you don't always need to use the full resolution. Most standalone games don't. And that's very, very true. Most standalone games run it below the display resolution. But the whole point of the PC is supposed to be to give you this, higher quality experience. And quite a lot of standalone games on Quest 3 actually do now render above the headset resolution, which is interesting. So, and also, like, what's the point of having this beautiful, graphically detailed virtual world if you're, seeing it through a pixelated view? One of the things that I hate about modern rendering in a lot of games is how you do get this like very aliased image. It's like you have this photorealistic image, but you're seeing it through like this really aliased view because the focus is on all these post-processing effects and everything. I think there's a really interesting quote from Pixar's head of rendering from the 90s where they said the first thing for any image, the highest priority for any image should always be get rid of aliasing first. You should never see jaggy pixels and then worry about all of your fancy shaders and etc. We're still waiting for Ian to come back. I'm just going to check and see if maybe something has come up for him. I think Ian is having a problem with his headset here. I think Ian's not going to be joining us for the end of the show. I think he's having some tech issues. So I'll just finish up with a summary of those last two news pieces. These are all about Apple Vision Pro. And so the first one is about the headlines you may have seen about Vision Pro's production cuts. You'll have seen all of these headlines circling of, Apple dramatically cuts Vision Pro production among low demand. And this headline went very far. Lots and lots of different outlets covered it. Some even added the claim that Apple has cancelled Vision Pro 2. We'll talk about Vision Pro 2 at the end. It's not cancelled. And all of this came from a supply chain analyst, Ming-Chi Kuo. And you'll know that if you're an UploadVR reader or regular of the show, that we often actually do quote Ming-Chi Kuo, because he's not fully reliable, but he does sometimes predict Apple's moves years in advance. He's a supply chain analyst, so he could talk to supply chain and get an idea of what's going on. Sometimes he spectacularly misses, though, and I think this is one of those situations. So specifically, he's claiming, Kuo, that Apple reduced its sales forecast for Vision Pro from a market consensus of 750,000 units to around 450,000 units, which is a roughly 40% reduction. But there are two reasons that this claim does not make sense. Firstly, Kuo is claiming the decision is due to weaker than expected USA demand, leading to the production cut ahead of global launch. So according to Kuo, the logic is Apple is saying, oh, Americans don't want this headset, so everyone else probably isn't going to want this headset either. So let's not make as many in case we overproduce. But as recently as February, Kuo said that Apple's US target for 2024 was 150,000 to 200,000 units. And in January, he said that Apple had sold almost 200,000 pre-orders. So to be clear here, he's saying that their target was 150 to 200,000. And simultaneously he's saying for the entire year in America, right? And then simultaneously he's saying they sold 200,000 pre-orders. So he's previously said that Apple exceeded its entire sales target for the US in just the pre-orders. And that 200,000 figure was also separately reported by Mac Rumors. They cited a source with knowledge of Apple's sales numbers as saying that Apple had sold 200,000 Vision Pro pre-orders. So more importantly, that's only one thing, right? Firstly, that it doesn't make sense for Kuo to say that the US prices are the reason, or the US sales are the reason. More importantly, in January, Kuo was referencing Apple Vision Pro achieving a shipment volume of 500,000 units, 500,000, as the overall goal worldwide for 2024. So this isn't just a random number. This is what multiple sources report is Apple's supply limit for the entire year, regardless of demand. The Financial Times, The Information, and The Elec. These three sources. So the Financial Times is obviously a highly respected newspaper. Would very rarely release a report on something like this that would turn out to be false. The Information is a gold standard as well when it comes from tech reporting. They've reported about Apple's future moves for years and Meta's future moves, including things like the Ray-Ban glasses. All of that came in The Information. And The Elec is a South Korean newspaper. So they've all reported that Vision Pro's production is heavily constrained by the extremely limited supplies of near 4K OLED microdisplays. All three sources reported that Sony, the supplier, can only produce enough microdisplays for less than 500,000 headsets in 2024. And here's the kicker. Kuo himself agreed with this figure, saying back in September, Vision Pro production in 2024 will be limited to at most 400 to 600,000 units, right? So where on earth did this market consensus of 700 to 750,000 units come from? It doesn't make sense. What's happened here is Kuo has pulled a number out of the air that no one agreed Apple could even make that many headsets, even himself, and then said Apple is now cutting its target from this number down to this number, which happens to be right within the range of what they can even produce. So this is why I strongly suspect that something has gone wrong here with Kuo's report, and what he's claiming is simply not true. Vision Pro was never going to be a mass market success. It is a $3,500 headset. Nobody ever thought it was going to be a mass market hit. To turn around and then say, oh, this is like a failure. The reason that it's $3,500 is because of the near 4K OLED microdisplays. They are so hard to produce that Sony can only make 1 million of them in the first year. And remember, there's 2 per headset. So that means Apple can only make 500,000 headsets in 2024. So those displays are apparently costing Apple $350 each. So $700 per headset just for the displays.
Yeah.
You don't add on anything else. And there's Ian is back, so welcome back. I'm just before I hand over to Ian here, Rafi Nizam says, or they have insights on a large volume of returns, therefore refunds, and so their targets fall short. So this is another theory that people had. Oh, yes, and another headline grabber. Oh, Vision Pro has low or really high returns. Everyone's returning their Vision Pro, except Quo himself said that the return rate was 1%. Quo himself said that Apple Vision Pro's return rate is 1%, which is exactly the same as iPhones.
Yeah. All right. So lots of things to think about here. The one I want to point out is what David kind of led off, ended on there, where he talked about the component cost of the displays. Apple has to be trying its darndest to bring a second supplier online for displays that match the same resolution as what they've got here. And as you said, it's very hard. But when they do that, the moment that they bring a second supplier online and or a third or fourth, the cost of that piece inside the Vision Pro goes down tremendously. And that's when you might see a price cut. Like I think the thing that gets me here is people don't Apple has done price cuts in the past, is all I want to say.
Sure. So yeah, you're absolutely right to say that Apple's biggest priority for the Vision headset line is to get more micro OLED suppliers and to scale it up. And we know from multiple reports that Apple is talking to BOE, which is a huge display company. They make displays for a lot of Meta's headsets. They make displays. They've made displays for some iPhones. They're one of the big display manufacturers in China. So BOE is working hard to get a micro OLED 4K display into production by the end of this year. It won't be for the Vision because the resolution is slightly different. Sony will be the sole supplier for Vision Pro 1. But this actually brings us on to our next topic very, very nicely, because what Apple is wanting to get these new companies on, BOE, SIA is another one. SIA Technologies, they're actually the supplier for the Big Screen Beyond 2.5K micro OLED display. So SIA is working on getting their 2.5K display to be a 4K display for these future headsets. And then what Apple wants to do then is use that in new headsets, future headsets that are designed to use these different displays, because Sony just isn't cutting it. So according to Bloomberg's Mark Gurman, who is probably the gold standard when it comes to these reports, accurately reported many, many aspects of Vision Pro before it was even announced by Apple. According to Gurman, Apple's roadmap doesn't call for a Vision Pro 2 until the end of 2026, though the company is trying to figure out a way to bring a cheaper version to market before then. So what we may have in perhaps late 2025 or early 2026 is a Vision Air, or just a Vision, just a Apple Vision that is using these other suppliers' micro displays and cutting specs in other aspects. So the main one that Gurman has talked about in the past is that it might use an A series chipset from the iPhones instead of an M series chipset from the Macs. And the one that Apple is apparently debating is whether to get rid of EyeSight, the front display, because not only does it add cost, but it adds weight and complexity. It is the reason that they have to put their cameras down here, whereas a Quest 3 has its cameras up here, aligned to where your eyes are. This is EyeSight is a really interesting feature, and I really think it will be key to all of these headsets one day. But it's a really open question. Is it currently worth the cost and weight for how terrible it currently is?
Yeah, I think we've both kind of indicated it probably isn't. I think reading between the lines of both of our reporting, it's kind of like, yeah, that external display is really foundational for what we need for the future. But I would prefer less weight, and like it could have been 2D. It didn't need to be lenticular. Like I like the idea of indicating whether I've got clouds over my eyes. That's a cool idea, but I don't think I need to show my eyes at the same time. And I don't know if that maybe the cost savings there is negligible. So then why not go full lenticular and have it work for everyone in the room?
Yeah.
But yeah, it does seem like the easiest one to lose.
Yeah, the problem is, of course, that it is kind of the distinguishing feature. But if you are, the strange thing about the Vision Pro is that it's a perfect product for someone that lives alone, right? If you live with a family and you're going to watch your content on a TV because you can all see it at the same time, right? If you are like a couple that live together, if you're a family, the Vision Pro is for people who live alone. And in future, when these Vision headsets are cheaper, it'll be for teenagers, so that they in their own room they can watch whatever they want on a giant screen. And the ironic thing, of course, is that in that use case where you're alone, which is when the Vision Pro is meant for, it doesn't really matter that nobody can see your eyes because you're alone, right? So that's the thing here. But I do hope that one day eyesight is a standard feature on all headsets, because when you do find yourself in a situation where there's other people in the room, right now wearing a mixed reality headset breaks the social contract, because you can see someone without them knowing that you can, whether or not you can currently see them. And that they can. Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's really strange, right? That's really, really strange. It's really uncomfortable for people to see you wearing this box with cameras on it and look at them, because they're like, can you see me right now? Or are you, in a VR experience, or do you have your whole screen covered? And that is critical for headsets to be part of, like, you walk around the home with them. You're talking to other people while you still have them on. You walk into the room and you're doing some work on a giant virtual monitor setup, and you turn to the side to talk to someone. That's the kind of time where it really does make sense for them to see your eyes. But or if you're doing like a mixed reality experience, even, right? Say you're doing that Tilt 5 style tabletop situation that we're talking about, where you're all sitting around a table. Do you want to see everyone with just these opaque boxes on their face, or do you want to see their eyes?
Yeah, it's interesting to think of the relationship between cameras here and eyes, right? Like it's like these are what you pointed out here is they put the cameras here down to reproject. Like, these are where your eyes actually are. This is where they put the cameras, and it's the opposite over on Meta, where like these things are providing your computer vision for you. They're providing your vision for you, and then they're recreating your eyes. I don't ever forget that I'm interacting with someone with fake eyes on my face. Like, that's never. It's always apparent to them that they're talking with someone with something weird, and maybe they don't, like, I don't know if the person looking at me with the fake eyes really registers that they're fake at the same level that I do with the fake eyes looking out.
You do, because right? But I don't think the rendering's the problem, right? Like, the display's too dim is the main problem. It's too dim.
Mm.
If it was a lot brighter, it would help. But because it's lenticular, it's not. It's just so interesting that the whole product, when you think about it, is kind of had to be architected around this. They've actually, according to people who worked on the project that spoke to the information, this was the single hardest engineering challenge in the whole thing, that they had to somehow make pass-through work despite the cameras being nowhere near where your eyes are. Look at how much easier it is for Meta, but yet look at how different it is to then turn around and have someone look at you. Again, the marketing images of Vision Pro are always very funny, because obviously in real life it looks nothing like this, right? It does not look like that. It looks way, way dimmer and worse. The other problem is, of course, this is it's only lenticular horizontally. It's not 2-axis. So if you're higher than someone, so say they're sitting down, or say you're sitting down and they're standing up, you're lower than someone, the effect completely breaks. It no longer looks like you're actually looking through to their eyes. That's a huge problem as well. It's going to be a long time until this sort of thing can be solved, but eventually it will be. And for Vision Pro 2, they'll keep it, right? They'll keep it for Vision Pro 2. We're only talking about Vision Air or whatever it's called here.
See, what gets really interesting here is what does Meta gain by keeping eye tracking as not a required part of their platform, and what does Apple gain or lose? What is the push and pull there of requiring eye tracking as part of its overall experience? I think over time, like, what added hardware is required in there with the extra cameras, the extra displays, even the extra authentication, right? Like, that's a big thing to think about, right? You have optic ID on an Apple Vision Pro, which Apple claims, I believe they did it back in didn't they claim that they could identify different irises between twins?
I don't recall exactly, but as you say, there are all eye tracking is a massive value add. It's not something that detracts in any way, I don't think, other than obviously cost and weight. But it is so worth it. And with the displays of Vision Pro's resolution, you need it, right? You can't do raw rendering anymore like that. It's just wasteful. Foveated rendering is key to Vision Pro. It is absolutely essential for a headset of that resolution. So even from that perspective, eye tracking is necessary. And then, of course, you get to the interaction system where the entire thing is built around that. Meta not having eye tracking means that they're going to have to build their interaction system entirely around direct hand input for a very, very long time. Because even if the Quest 4 has eye tracking, they're still going to have to support Quest 3 and all of any of the Horizon OS headsets that don't have eye tracking. Meta has by not putting eye tracking in Quest 3, Meta has basically said that for the next decade or so, they can no longer.
There we go, David. All right, there we go. There, we got it out of David's mouth. I tricked him into my ploy. That's has been a 2-hour plan to get him to say that. Right. No, like that's what I'm ultimately arguing or questioning when it comes to the architecture of these platforms over the long term. If you're talking about Meta having an operating system that is largely like a keyboard floating right here that you have to tap out with your fingers, and then also a whole like a display right here that you have to reach forward and tap on all the time, that's going to be pretty tiring. Of course, you can do the controllers to point at laser things and do that too from time to time. But like that's,
and you can pick up one. You can use one now, and still have your other hand track. That is a thing. You can kind of do the TV remote approach. I guess that's what Meta is going to be hoping that you do. And maybe one of these Horizon OS headsets will have a literal like TV remote style controller, just a wand that you sit there and kind of point with. But that's not as rapid and intuitive as eye tracking, right? Like the Vision Pro's interaction system, when you demo it to someone, I've actually had someone say completely unprompted, like I did not in any way say this. They were like, this feels like I'm using telepathy. They're like, it feels like I'm controlling this thing with my mind. That is what Apple has said. That's what it feels like to use it. It's on a completely different level to anything we used to directly interact.
Yeah, and so what I'm getting at there on the whole like platform war thing of Horizon OS and how it ends up feeling over the long term, right? If you've got a lot of flat panels that have to be positioned around you all the time, that feels like a lot of surfaces on which there's just constant little pop-ups and boxes to try to push you to do something, right? Like that's the same experience Facebook has always done for us, is got this little window with a whole bunch of little things competing to try to push you into certain activities. And I'm feeling like that's the kind of interface Meta's going to lock itself into with this partnership plan, right? Like you have your LG window over here, you could have your Xbox window over here, sure, but you still got to reach out and touch a lot of it in order to interact with it, rather than this telepathy thing where over the span of 5 years it could really grate. It could really feel this could be tiring and old. I know that's what the wristband
it is
could be
tiring.
there for.
It is tiring. Well, yeah, the wrist, that's a very good point, that the wristband add-on will be interesting to see how that's used in VR. If it seems right now that they're only targeting that for the glasses, but there's no reason that couldn't be used on headsets as well. And I do think controllers are a big part of this, right? Like we are always talking about, oh, when will Meta not sell the controllers? When will Meta not sell the controllers? But Mark Zuckerberg, every time he talks about comparing Quest to Apple Vision, he's constantly saying, and we've got precision controllers as one of the biggest points in the advantage. I wonder if Zuckerberg himself is the reason that Quest 3 comes with controllers. And I'm sure there were people in the company that was saying, let's sell this thing without controllers and add them on optionally. And apparently it's been a fierce debate about the cheaper headset, the Quest 3 Lite or the Quest 3S. But now they can hold that up as this is a huge advantage, right? Where they say you have these controllers that not only can you use them like a TV remote and pointed stuff and like a laser pointer, but it also allows for gaming.
To be clear, and I just want to go back, I think we're ending the show here right now. We're getting really close to the end, but there was one core question here I think I wanted to ask you or remind me. Did Meta explicitly say that the Xbox headset is not going to be this Quest 2 with an XR2 Gen 2 processor?
No, but the image is literally of a black Quest 3. It's like it's a black Quest 3. Like the Xbox headset is a black Quest 3 with an Xbox controller in the box.
It was a little rendering on a little image. I don't understand how you can.
I'll bring it up. Oh, let's get the image up.
All right. We're gonna hallucinate our way into figuring out what headset this is.
I don't think any hallucination is required. It's very, very clearly a Quest 3. You have the side camera in the exact same position, the exact same head strap, the
I can't see
headphone.
the lenses here. That would be the only difference.
No, it wouldn't. It would be a lot thicker. Fresnel lenses are thicker. It's literally it's the exact same head strap, the exact same camera position, it's a Quest 3 with an Xbox controller in the box.
Yeah, so but we do think if it didn't come with the precision controllers, we do think it could be sold a little bit cheaper than the current.
No, this is going to be a limited edition. This thing will cost more. It's a limited edition. They're going to sell it for like probably $700, something like maybe $800, something like that, I would guess. I mean, an Xbox controller costs roughly about as much as two touch controllers. You know, they're very two touch controllers are basically an Xbox controller cut in half with some LEDs.
I know. We'll get into this more next week. We've got a lot of things to discuss and unfold when it comes to controllers in VR. Thank you so much for our audience for tuning in for this long episode. Thank you to Dave for the incredible work, keeping everyone updated on the news, and working with me to help summarize everything that's going out there. It's been a heck of a couple weeks here this last week. I don't think when big news like this drops, when platforms open up or announce things, it takes days and weeks for us to digest really the impact and the way things are going to change. We've had a couple of those already this year, right? Apple Vision Pro launching, Steam Link arriving on the Quest platform, and then Horizon OS being this new name for Meta's ecosystem. Each of those is bigger in its own right than anything that's happened in like 2 or 3 previous years. So I think we've got a couple more of those coming up this year. And thank you all for tuning in with us on this journey. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Yeah, the Facebook acquisition of Oculus and Apple releasing Vision Pro, the two biggest events in the industry that spark all of the companies around them to say, okay, this is real. We got to do something. And that's what we saw that after Facebook acquired Oculus. And now we're seeing it again after Apple released the headset. There's going to be a lot of companies jumping in, a lot of strategies, a lot of partnerships, a lot of things. It's going to be a very, very exciting year for VR as always. Thanks so much, everyone. We will not see you next week because it's Google I/O, unless I'm mistaken. We're going to have to do it on a different day. We will schedule it when we know, but we need to watch Google I/O because it's very, very possible that Google will release Android XR.
If Andrew from Alchemy doesn't walk out on that stage, you messed up, Google. If I don't see Alchemy out there doing something, what are you doing this for? Okay, all right, that's it. We'll see you in the future.
Thanks so much, everyone.